Welcome to the School of Love, the place where miracles are normal. Hello, and welcome to the School of Love, the place where we learn practical tools based on scientific research and our own experiences towards improving ourselves, living life to its fullest, and contributing to the best of our abilities to the world around us. I am Dr. Grajdian, and I am a professor of media studies and anthropology at Hiroshima University. In my free time, I am doing my best to guide you in building up a life of contentment, joy, and fulfillment, while applying lessons learned in school to overcome the difficulties, challenges, and insecurities of the real world. Today's video is part of a new series on the changing world order and its impact on regular citizens like you and me. I have been reading Grajdian's book Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order, published initially in November 2021. And it made me ponder on what it means for regular citizens like you and me that the entire world is undergoing dramatic changes which we cannot influence at all, but which are crucially impacting our own lives and the future. In today's video on the changing world order and its impact on regular citizens like you and me, I share my thoughts on marriage and the manner in which the concept and phenomenon of marriage is changing itself under the pressure on individuals to continuously challenge and reinvent themselves. Enormously long life expectancies, unimaginable less than 4 or 5 decades ago, bring with them particular questions and preoccupations which have a huge influence on marriage. So what precisely is happening and what can we as individuals and as a collective do about it? This video explores this question on a personal level. And now, first things first, that is the important disclaimers. The first disclaimer serves to strongly emphasize the fact that this YouTube channel, The School of Love, is not part of my educational and research activities at Hiroshima University. It is nonetheless part of my privilege, joy, and sense of duty to propagate and implement knowledge, information, as well as inspiration and motivation outside the limited framework of academic endeavors. Together, we can build up a better tomorrow for as many of us as possible. The second disclaimer relates to the fact that I am a trained musician and musicologist, not a psychologist, therapist, or counselor. The ideas I am sharing in my videos reflect my deep-going preoccupation with life, my own life and other people's lives, and express the results of my experiences, research, and for better or for worse, my failures, as well as my recovery from those failures, recovery which is still ongoing. The ideas expressed in the videos on this channel, named The School of Love, cannot and may not and must not replace the consultation with specialists in whichever areas of your life you might have questions or you might struggle with. If you are new to this channel, at this moment I would like to ask you to please consider subscribing, sharing, liking, commenting. Thank you very, very much. This helps us not only with that mysterious algorithm which seems to dominate the YouTube galaxy, but also with contributing to the expansion of the community of humans doing their best to impact positively the world and those around them by discovering their authentic selves and living life wholeheartedly. Thanks again. So how does the concept and the phenomenon of marriage change when the world itself is changing around us? First of all, we have to imagine that marriage, we have to recollect that marriage is a contract. And the moment when it was invented as a socio-economic institution, humans used to live very short lives. Humans used to live 20 to 25 years for the most part of human history. And these very short lifespans were due mainly to, in case of women, pregnancies, childbirth or consequences to childbirth, and in case of men, war and labor accidents. And so marriage, on one hand, was based on the fact that people lived short lives. It is a social economic institution, and most importantly, it is a contract. It is probably the most important contract we have in the world. And even more importantly, is the fact that this contract does not have an exit clause. So in any imaginable contract, there are always a clause for termination. So what happens when the signing parties don't respect their obligations, or in which situations can that contract be terminated? In case of marriage, we don't have this. In case of marriage, only death is supposed to terminate the contract called marriage. Now, when people used to live short lives, marriage was something which was, as a contract, as a phenomenon, as a socio-economic institution, would last something between a couple of days to a couple of years the most. Nowadays, when we live such long lives, marriages are supposed to last decades. And of course there are situations, and I'm sure in pre-modern times there are also situations when marriages would last decades. But there are exceptions, and nowadays as well. Nowadays, there are people who stay happily married to their spouse for decades, but these are the exceptions. And if we look more closely into those exceptions, we would find very particular situations, very particular conditions which have led to that decades-long marriage. Statistically speaking, more than half of these decades-long marriages are actually dysfunctional. They stay together for religious reasons or for the children. And it's more like a roommate agreement than a full-fledged marriage, which includes, for better or for worse, sexual activity. So how and what precisely happens when the world is changing? People live incredibly long lives, and the entire society is actually changing, because here we do not have this linear intergenerational contract anymore, or we do not have this linear social contract anymore. Even this, I'll have a different video on social contract and how it is changing in times of turmoil, and also the intergenerational contract and how it is changing in times of turmoil. But here what I'm talking about, marriage as a contract between two individuals, and between each individual and the state, and between the individuals as a couple and the state. And so the most important element is that it does not have an exit clause apart from death, which could be decades away. And in these decades, anything could happen. And we know from experience, history is a good teacher in this concern, that states, within decades, lots of things can happen. And the state can change the laws and the regulations so that it doesn't, what seems normal and understandable now won't be the same maybe in 10 years, in 20, in 30, in 40 years. So how is an individual going to deal with that? For instance, in Europe, less and less people are getting married. United States and large parts of Asia still have this concept of marriage as fundamental to society. But in Europe, people don't do this anymore. Why? Because they understand that marriage as an institution was created in times which were fundamentally different from the times we're living in right now. And if two people decide to stay together, they don't need a contract. Maybe they need a symbolical contract. So the commitment, the individual commitment to stay together And maybe they need, for instance, a very clear agreement, which are the circumstances, which are the mutual obligations, the mutual rights, so that that partnership functions. But in a state-backed marriage as a concept, these obligations and rights are actually implied, not explicitly described. So they are supposed to take care of each other. So what does this exactly mean? We know that marriage is actually a socio-economic unit. They are socially recognized as such, and economically they have to take care of each other, whatever that might mean, and they are very lucrative tax breaks when someone is married compared to singles who pay much more taxes all over the world. Personally, as a post-feminist person, I don't think this is the right approach. Personally, I think it is very important that individuals remain individuals even when they get married, even if when they enter a partnership, and that staying in that partnership should be an individual choice based on specific agreements. So the agreement must be there, the rights, the obligations, the expectations, and the circumstances under which that agreement is terminated, is losing its validity. But allowing the state, allowing the tradition, allowing the history to burden us with implied expectations, with implied ideas, I don't think this is working for long anymore. We see this already in Japan, where we see this in United States, the MACTO movement, and the men who go their own way movement. We see the herbivore boys or men in Japan. We see all this. We see the incels all over the world. So the so-called involuntary celibates, but there are also the cells, those who choose to be celibatary, so that they are not, bluntly put, baby trapped by women and forced into marriage or forced into paying alimony for essentially for 18 to 20 or even more, even longer years. So the way I see marriage changing under the pressure of current times and after the pressure of changing, of history changing itself, is that sooner or later it will become so obsolete that people won't do it anymore. So women might insist into getting married, but men will withdraw increasingly from the institution itself. And then we have to see how conservative societies are going to bring babies into the world. So I hope this helps. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I'm looking forward to welcoming you very soon again. Love and peace to you all.